acid bath murderer, also known as John George HAIGH. He was born on the 24th of July 1909 at Stamford in Lincolnshire. He was brought up in Outwood, Yorkshire, where his ultra-religious Plymouth Brethren father was a colliery foreman. He left school at 17 and was apprenticed for a time to a motor engineer. He left home, and on the 6th of July 1934 he got married. Not wanting to work for someone else, he started in business for himself by forging vehicle documents. He was soon brought to justice for this, and he received 15 months at Leeds Assizes in November 1934. His wife divorced him, and on his release he started a dry cleaning business with a partner. This was quite a successful venture, until his partner was killed in a car crash and the business collapsed. He moved to London in 1936, where he was able to get a job as chauffeur to the McSwan family, but discovered another swindle that, at Surrey Assizes in November 1937, cost him 4 years penal servitude. Released in August 1940, he was back inside within a year, doing 21 months for stealing. It was plain to see even at this early time that he was never going to earn an honest living. This time on his release he became a salesman for a firm in Crawley, an occupation he followed until 1944. In the summer of 1944 he happened to bump into William Donald McSwan, who he had first met in 1936. On the 9th of September 1944 the two men went for a drink at the Goat in Kensington High Street. They then went to 79 Gloucester Road, where HAIGH had a workshop. Here HAIGH smashed McSwan's skull and put his body in a water butt that he had filled with acid. He then went around to see McSwan's parents, with whom he got quite well with, and told them that their son had gone into hiding to avoid the call-up. He was able to maintain this deception by sending the couple letters purporting to be from their son, until July 1945, when he murdered the McSwans and disposed of their bodies in the same way. Acting as William McSwan, he managed to obtain legal control of all their possessions and sold everything, making over £4,000 in the process, which in 1945 was a great deal of money. In 1947 he met a couple named Henderson during a property deal. In February 1948 he took them, one at a time, from the Metropole Hotel, Brighton, where they lived, to his new workshop in Crawley. Here he shot them and popped them in the now familiar drum full of acid. He paid their hotel bill and removed all their valuables. By February 1949 HAIGH had been living in the Onslow Court Hotel, South Kensington, for 4 years. One of the other residents was Mrs. Olive Henrietta Olivia Robarts Durand Deacon. She was a 69-year-old widow who had lived at the hotel for over 6 years. The two often exchanged pleasantries at mealtimes, and HAIGH had told her that he was an engineer and inventor. At lunch on the 14th of February 1949, Mrs. Durand Deacon showed HAIGH some false fingernails that she had designed and asked HAIGH if could improve the idea to a product that would be marketable. He told her that he would think about it. On the 18th of February 1949, the two of them drove to his ramshackle workshop in Crawley in his Elvis. Here he shot her in the back of the head and, after removing her jewelry and fur coat, put her body in a 45-gallon corrosion-resistive drum and filled up the tank with sulfuric acid. He returned to Onslow Court Hotel and ate a 3-course dinner. The next day, Saturday, guests at the hotel, who were getting anxious about the absence of Mrs. Durand Deacon from breakfast, asked Hay if he knew of her whereabouts. He told them that he had arranged to meet her but that she had failed to turn up for their appointment. By the Sunday, it was obvious that something was wrong. Hay approached Mrs. Lane, who had shown concern the day before, and asked if anything had been heard from the missing woman. Mrs. Lane told him that she had had no news and that she intended going to the police that afternoon. Hay offered to accompany her and drove her to Chelsea Police Station. The policewoman, Sergeant Lambourne, was suspicious of Hay from the start. On Monday, February 1949, Scotland Yard's record office was contacted and Hay's criminal record came to light. Hay had driven to Crawley that morning and emptied the sludge from the tank onto the ground outside the workshop. He had then gone to Horsham and had Mrs. Durand Deacon's jewellery valued. When he returned to the hotel, the police were waiting for him. He gave them a statement reiterating his story about the missed appointment. Thursday saw the police back at Onslow Court Hotel for another statement from Hay, which was largely the same as his first statement, but with a few extra details. Saturday, the 26th of February 1949, and the police visited the workshop at Crawley. The door to the workshop was forced and the detectives noted the rubber apron, gas mask and empty carboys. They also found a recently fired .38 Enfield revolver and a dry cleaning receipt for a black Persian lamb coat. At 4:15 p.m. on Monday, the 28th of February 1949, Detective Inspector Albert Webb was waiting at Onslow Court when Hay returned. Webb took Hay back to Chelsea Police Station to assist them with their inquiries. Later that night he confessed to Webb, saying, "I've destroyed her with acid. You'll find the sludge that remains at Leopold Road. Every trace has gone. How can you prove murder if there's no body?" He went on to add McSwan's and the Hendersons to his confession, claiming that he had killed them all so that he could drink their blood. On Tuesday, the 1st of March 1949, Home Office pathologist Dr. Keith Simpson examined the Crawley workshop. He found blood stains on the walls and a hat pin at the bottom of the 45-gallon drum. After Dr. Simpson had noticed a gallstone in the sludge in the yard, all the residue was collected and taken to the police laboratory. Here it was processed and it produced a list that included 28 pounds of animal fat, part of a foot, 2 more gallstones and a full set of dentures. These, once identified by Mrs. Durand Deacon's dentist, sealed Hay's fate. 12 medical doctors in all examined Hay in prison, some before and some after his trial. They were particularly interested in his claims to have a compulsion to kill for blood. Most often, such a compulsion is part of a sexual deviation and is incidental to the sexual frenzy itself. Hay gave no indication of such a perversion. In fact, he seemed to have little interest in sex. Hay went through several examinations, including an electroencephalogram. The results were normal. Most of the doctors were of the opinion that he was sane and was merely malingering, or faking, his insanity. 4 psychiatrists examined him for the defense. Not one was able to give the opinion that Hay was not responsible for his actions. Dr. Henry Yellow Lees, when told of the opinion of his colleagues, came up with a different result. He believed that HAIGH was mentally ill, consistent with the description of paranoia, but even that diagnosis was not conclusively deemed a mental disease. Nevertheless, this professional opinion was all that the defense had. HAIGH was charged with the murder of Mrs. Durand Deacon on the 2nd of March and removed to Lewes Prison. His trial began at Lewes Assizes on the 18th of July 1949 and finished the following afternoon. It took the jury 17 minutes to find him guilty. He was hanged by Pierry Point at Wandsworth on the 10th of August 1949, at Wandsworth Prison. John George HAIGH, the murderer who dissolved his victims in acid, was executed finally. He bequeathed his clothing to Madame Tussaud's Chamber of Horrors, where a wax figure of him was erected. He sent instructions that it must always be kept in perfect condition, the trousers creased, the hair parted, his shirt cuffs showing. Among other murderers cast in wax, HAIGH received his place in history. John George HAIGH was 40 years old at the time of his execution. Thank you for watching Death Row.